This is one I just released.
Hmm.
I'm calling this arboreal, the Damascus pattern that
Uh-huh.
I made. This takes a lot of repeat processes of layering steels, forge welding them together, manipulating the layers, recutting, restacking, and twisting. And this all starts with just layering two types of steels
Yeah.
and then manipulating to get this end result. And this pattern runs through the entire blade.
Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan from Autodesk, maker, designer, and inventor. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we talk to makers, inventors, and designers from shop to shop. Today, I spoke to Nick Anderson, who is a knife maker. He's got a background in art and design and found himself in this career where he makes high-end knives using CNC machines, 3D printers, and his own hands. Let's dive in. All right, Nick Anderson from Nanda Knives. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're up in Humboldt County?
Yeah, Humboldt County, we're about 4.5 hours north of San Francisco, kind of up in the redwoods on the coast.
Hmm. Eureka or
Yeah, I
Arcata?
live in Eureka. My shop is in Arcata, so I
Uh-huh.
got about a 20-minute commute each way, and it's nice. Gives me time to clear my head on the way to work every day and get out of the house. And yeah, I like working out of the house.
We were just up there earlier this year, and we were touring Logan Olson's shop. And
Yeah,
so I understand
Logan's
you two know each other.
absolutely. Yeah, Logan is a great buddy. We hang out quite a bit.
Yeah.
Funny dude. We have a lot of fun. And he introduced me to a lot of CNC concepts and really helped me out with learning quite a bit. I mean, really kind of showing me the ropes with all sorts of processes and just like pointing the finger in the direction of things to pay attention to, things to learn,
Yeah.
tooling to get, and even helping me get up and running on my kind of a CNC Bridgeport at home.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Cool.
that's fully going. I'm making parts with it, so it's cool.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you're probably the only two people up there doing CNC work or
Well, no,
close to it.
there's a couple other people, surprisingly. There's
Yeah.
actually a handful of people, but a lot of them are kind of just doing, some job shop sort of stuff to where like it's just part of their operation, but maybe not, I wouldn't say they're selling themselves as a CNC outfit.
Sure.
So, kind of some machine shops that might have a Haas or something like that. But yeah, there's a handful up here, but I would say Logan's by far the biggest operation doing CNC. And for my processes, it's a lot of handwork, but I am very excited continuously to bring CNC more into what I'm doing. So that's been a big push in the last year and a half or so.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for that. Like geographically, it makes sense to me because it's pretty isolated, right? Like you've got a
Mhm.
small airport, you don't have a big rail line going through there. There's no
Yeah.
like the five freeway is a couple hundred miles away.
Uh-huh.
But both of you have these products that are just high end, bespoke, like low volume. So, a little more money in shipping or a little longer lead time isn't really going to matter a whole lot, right?
Completely. It definitely the benefit you get from not needing to pay the high dollar rents for both where you live and where you have a shop in kind of busier cities totally like affords you that and extra. It's nice. I mean, wherever I've lived in the past decade, practically, I've just spent most days in a shop. So I could be on Mars. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
it doesn't even matter. So as long as I can ship stuff to people, it's fine. So, and that's
sure.
my preferred way to live these days. I just, just being in a shop every day, I'm happy. So,
Yeah. So okay, now you're into cooking. I guess that makes sense because a lot of the work you do are these really high end cooking knives. Like what
mhm.
came first? Did you get interested in blacksmithing and knife making first and then cooking, or
Yeah,
what's
good
the story
question.
there?
Uh, so I would say that, I've been an artist my whole life. So it started with like painting and glasswork back in the day. I did get into metalwork before I really got into cooking, and that was kind of through jewelry and bronze, like cast bronze. So that was the very initial thing. When I was about 21, I read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, and that just inspired this whole massive interest in cooking for me. And that then turned into just kind of I don't know, a future interest in or an interest in knives and collecting knives. And then, that prior experience with metalwork, when I kind of discovered you could make knives, it just all clicked for me. It was very immediate and very like obvious when it happened. So it was a perfect thing. And it just
Yes.
stuck. I've done a lot of other mediums over the years, but this one is the one that just stuck.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean the Bay Area, it really doesn't get much better if you want to if it, anything kind of artisanal, I guess, right? Like
Yeah.
there's what's that, there's the oh come on, what's the name of that place? There's it's that big like the Crucible, right?
The Crucible in
I'm
Oakland.
sure you
Yeah.
spent some time there.
Oh yeah, I used to be like a volunteer there,
Uh-huh.
and I'd volunteer for all these iron smelts that we would
Yeah.
do. I was involved with their blacksmith shop. Did some stuff with their glass department. They're a pretty rad outfit for
Yeah.
somebody wanting to get introductory experience and access to all sorts of equipment for for various mediums involving fire. It's really
Hmm.
cool. It's great they exist. And so they were a very cool thing to have access to when I first moved to Oakland. Fairly soon after that, I met this guy Jim Austin, who his shop is just one of the coolest shops on the West Coast for
Yeah.
blacksmithing and for forging and all of that. So I got involved with Jim, and he became a very close friend. So,
Hmm.
he still comes and visits up here all the time. He got a house up here, so
Oh,
he,
cool.
yeah. So, but great guy, great community through that scene as well. Amazing access to some of the coolest power hammers and different equipment. So I really learned a ton being in Jim's shop. The
Yeah.
Crucible was great. Gym shop was just, that's where it really took off for me.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know, the place has such a long history of manufacturing, right? Like
Yeah,
you immediately think of World War II because that's where the big shipyard was and like the Rosie the Riveter meme and that whole thing was
completely.
there. But like, it goes back a lot further than that and it sort of continued past the kind of industrial era into tech and all that. And I mean, yeah, there's so many great shops there, like so many
Yeah.
private shops. They like specialize in these weird little things, and it's a friend of a friend, and then you go visit, and it's just like this mind blowing place with machines you've never heard of, and yeah,
There's so many
it's
shops you don't know exist there. It's just all they're just all operating
yeah,
completely undercover.
yeah,
Not on purpose, but just people where they have their heads down. And
yep,
so, yeah, it's cool. Like it takes a while to kind of discover these places, but you walk in, you're like, oh my God, this exists. It's
yeah,
cool. And that's how Gym Shop is, from the street. It's just this concrete building with a closed
sure,
door most of the time. So yeah.
unassuming,
But it's cool that kind of like industrial history of Oakland still is kind of evident throughout. It's like rapidly changing still to
hmm,
where unfortunately a lot of that's leaving,
yep.
but it's still there. It's still there some.
So when did you go to Thailand? Like, tell us that story.
I went in 2013. Well, so I first traveled to Thailand in 2012, and it was just a vacation out of interest. I was like way into Thai food and like Vietnamese food, and I was very passionately into cooking then. I wanted to go to culinary school and do all that. But yeah, so Asia was always kind of like to me like the best food in the world. Like Thailand up there, Vietnamese on par, I'd say, and and the other areas as well, like just fantastic food. So wanted to kind of like travel around and experience all that, and I did that for 3 months, and it was pretty eye-opening, pretty incredible. It was like one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. Um, and yeah, I was there for 3 months, kind of fell in love with the place. I met somebody from Switzerland that didn't live there, but she was staying out there. And so we kind of did some back and forth from the US to Switzerland. It was kind of difficult to get visas in each other's country. So we just decided to move back out there together. And we figured we'd do 6 months or 12 months, and that just turned into 5 years. And so it just kind of all happened that way. But yeah, it was cool. We moved out there. We had no idea how it was going to go, no idea how we were going to make a living.
So you started your business there, right? So that
Yeah.
how did that work? I mean, were you renting a shop or was there sort of like more like a co-op kind of thing or
There was a co-op. I was involved with a maker space out there. That didn't have anything to do with the knife portion. I kind of did a lot of I did a lot of laser cutting for packaging and stuff there. I did some Arduino programming to build the heat control device. Uh, which kind of factors into how it all started. So I had a house with this kind of like little space that ran behind it that I converted. It might have been 300 square feet or so. Converted that whole thing into my shop. I built this whole outdoor area for forging and all of that. But it really started with just this massive interest in knife making and no way to buy tools for it because over there we there's just not the access to tools that you have in the US. So I had to learn before I even made a knife, I had to learn to build a 2x72 belt grinder, a forge, and a actually the heat treatment kiln came later. But those first two things I built before I ever made a knife. So I had to learn a bunch of stuff around welding and some machining and God, I knew nothing about any of this stuff back then. So it's hilarious. I still have my first grinder here in my home garage and shoot, it works, man. But it's funky, but it works. But it made all my first knives. My forge worked great. Yeah. So I had to learn all this stuff about building these machines and tools first. And a lot of that was I met this guy Ben from France early on, and he was just getting into knife making right when I was. Somebody had heard I was getting into knife making. They were like, "Oh, you have to meet Ben." So I met Ben. He's from France. He's a good buddy also. We hit it off pretty quick, and then we just spent countless days riding around on motorbikes in Chiang Mai to these various shops to get bearings or aluminum round stock or just and it's all split up into different shops selling different things. So one shop will sell your steel, one will sell your aluminum, one will sell bearings, one will sell nuts and bolts, hardware. So
But
just
it's all
constantly
like in the same cluster. It's almost like you're
if
going
you're
to a
lucky, if you're
yeah,
lucky, a lot of it was just scavenger hunt day after day after day.
yeah.
I look back on that and it was so damn aggravating at the time. But it's like I have very fond memories of that because we'd just be like riding around on motorbikes with like 8 feet, 8 foot lengths of steel strapped to the back. So sketchy.
It's
But
like
like,
you're like reinforcing every stereotype I have in my head about Thailand.
oh yeah,
Like
we just
you're on like an old Vespa knockoff with like
totally.
stuff strapped to it.
Yeah, we played right into it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. Like, I mean, God, we had some sketchy moments with that. Holy crap. I mean, I remember Ben had his steel like fly off the back of the bike when he was taking a turn, like he's some angle iron or something like that. But no one ever got hurt and it all went mostly well. But yeah, that was crazy, man. We have all these like amazing forums in the US for, these communities where people talk about how to build these machines and stuff. So there's a ton of research around all that. And it was kind of like pairing that information with, uh, what various parts we had available out there. So yeah, it all worked out and God then jumped headfirst into the actual knife making portion.
Yeah, so you've got your little shop in your house, and how do you start the business? How do you start selling, knives, I guess is what you started with, right?
Yeah, God, first couple knives at first, I wasn't even making culinary knives in the beginning. I just started making hunting knives because they were smaller and they were kind of just more, I could wrap my head around them more. So made my first knife as a hunting knife, made a leather sheath for it, bought a wood burner and, burned a design into the leather, did some riveting. It was fun. Um, but the second knife I made immediately, it was hard to find steel in the beginning. I just had no idea where to look. So I was just like taking old bandsaw blades and repurposing them and files and stuff like that. But so the second one was kind of just this larger kind of butcher knife, I guess you'd call it. And I didn't sell any of these, but after kind of sharing those two, I got my first order from a relative up in Canada. He ordered a Nakiri from me, had never done it before, but I gave him a good deal on it and I made it. And that was kind of my first order. And these were kind of earlier days of Instagram and just everything was so much easier on Instagram back then. You could just like post a photo of you holding a half finished knife and the response would be pretty substantial.
Sure.
And it's just so easy to sell stuff back then by just kind of sharing stuff very, very organically and not even making a major effort to kind of have any sort of sales strategy.
Mhm.
So there was a bit of a sweet spot then. I think people were a little bit less used to seeing custom knives made back then, so it's just kind of more of a wow factor. And then Forge and Fire came out and it started picking up even more. So we kind of picked up this like really nice kind of there's this really good momentum around all of it. Instagram was easier, Forge and Fire was hitting and is so yeah, it was a good start for me. It's just easy to keep getting orders at that point. And so, I was selling them for way less than I do now back then, but my cost of living was just rock bottom. It was awesome. I mean, it was this time in my life where I could truly just focus on the craft every single day, uninterrupted. It was amazing. And I didn't have this need to make this high dollar amount per month just to make ends meet. So it was just, yeah, it was awesome. It was so cool. So I just, I pretty quickly kind of latched onto the culinary knife angle and because that is kind of what probably got me into it in the beginning. And yeah, and then I've mostly stuck to that over the years. I've made more hunting knives and Bowie knives and swords and stuff like that because it's really fun to mix it up. But yeah, as far as getting into knife making with kind of minimal setup, you can do that. It's a great way to kind of start and try it out. And I think most people do start that way. Once you get into it, you pretty quickly do want better equipment and better known steels and materials. So it's like when you start out, you just want to make something. So it's really nice to be able to just grab something and make it and not need a heat treatment kiln and all that stuff. You can even just grind a file hardened and not even need to harden the blade. So,
Mhm.
it is accessible in that sense. Moving past that, it's one of the most insane things to set up ever. I mean, you probably talk to a lot of like machinists and stuff too, and I think setting up a machine shop is probably fairly similar or a CNC shop. There's just so much gear. With knives, it almost spans more materials. Like you need woodworking equipment, you
Mhm.
need metalworking equipment, you need machining equipment. You have the blacksmithing and forging element. If you do bladesmithing, it is helpful maybe to delineate there's kind of like bladesmithing, which involves the forging and the fire, and then knife making would be the larger general term. But a lot of people within that just do what's called stock removal, where they just take steel and they just grind it into a knife and harden it and complete it. So you do have those two sort of paths with knife making, kind of bladesmithing with the fire and the forging, and stock removal with kind of just material removal. It's kind of like a subtractive process.
Mhm. Yeah. So is that how you got into CNC? Like, using Fusion for 3D modeling and then CNC machining?
Totally, yeah. I started using Fusion in Thailand to design that first grinder I was talking about. I laid out in Fusion.
Oh,
Uh, it was pretty bad, but yeah, I
first
got
try though,
that.
right?
Yeah, I got kind of the student or personal or whatever free model there was, and I did that. Then I developed a second grinder, which I actually wanted to kind of sell as a product, and I really put a ton of time into that. I did that in Fusion as well. Um, yeah, all my
Interesting. So you started with a machine. I didn't
yeah,
realize that. Huh.
yeah.
So why
Yeah,
not just buy one? What is it about your grinder? What did you need that you couldn't get off the shelf? Or
you
was
just
it just
couldn't
the fact
get.
that you were in Thailand?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you just
Yeah.
couldn't get that stuff out there. I
Uh-huh.
mean, you could argue, even if you live here, that that stuff is a bit expensive. It's a few grand to get into a decent grinder. But no, out there, it's like a few grand, and you would have to ship it overseas. So you're paying an extra 40 to 50% and
Wow.
shipping. So you're probably paying double to get it out there. So you just don't do it. It's like it'd just be stupid to do it.
Sure.
Um, so that's why I just needed to go machine first. But it's like after I built my first grinder, I learned so much about what makes a good grinder that I was like, oh, I might as well just redo this and sell this thing. So I did go through that entire process, prototyped everything, actually had a working model, and it still lives in my shop now. And it's my favorite grinder in my shop. I've even bought a bunch of US made grinders, but the one I made is just so beefy and overbuilt, and it's got hardened platens and just It's just God, I love it. It's so sweet. So
Yeah.
it is the grinder I use the most. It's also got a 3 horse motor, so it's bigger than pretty much any, you could just
Overkill.
it's complete overkill, which is my preference for anything.
Sure.
And so uh I did do that whole thing. I did it all in Fusion and yeah, worked great. And I didn't do anything with knives in Fusion until maybe like a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
I started a kind of a new company with a business partner called Neoma.
Hmm.
And we're doing culinary accessories and steak knives is one thing we're doing with Neoma. So we're developing a line of steak knives, and that's all going to be CNC and then handwork after that.
Hmm.
But the all the initial kind of shaping is going to be done on CNC.
Got it. So you sort of you get started there, you do like your roughing toolpath, for example,
Yep,
and then you take it off and then you're doing hand finishing to get the nice, clean, like polished finish there.
exactly.
Yeah, but then that allows you to do volume. So now you're getting more into something more affordable where you can, like you're not necessarily just going for whoever, whatever the star from Top Chef is probably who you've been selling your
Oh man.
kitchen knives to, right?
Oh, I'd be happy to chat with them.
Yeah.
Like any of those people. Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah. Most common type of customer is probably for my company, Nanda Knives, has been just kind of well-to-do home cooks
Okay.
and professional chefs that just super care about their knives, which
Yeah.
a lot do. Uh,
So okay, talk me through that because this is very similar to our conversation we had with Logan Olson about the
mm,
putters, right?
yeah.
And the people he's selling his putters to are very particular about, every little detail of it. So like when you're
Oh yeah.
when you're doing a bespoke knife for somebody, um, just talk me through that. Do you get an order first and they sort of give you some specs or like how does that work?
Yeah, sometimes I'll open up my books is what we refer to it as for custom orders. And in that case, I'm willing to kind of take requests and kind of go through the specs that people want and make a custom piece. Then I'll kind of close that down for a bit and just work on knives I want to make
Hmm.
and then just sell those.
Hmm.
The thing is, that's my favorite because I've been making knives for 10 years at this point and an artist and designer well before that. So, I just feel like I have the most informed kind of, I mean, not to be like cocky about it. I don't
Well,
know.
you've got experience, man. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You're
it's
not
just,
you're not being cocky. You're just telling the truth, you know?
yeah, it's funny sometimes just the requests you get and you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
and hey, I also totally like appreciate people putting in custom orders and it is a fun process to do and I do want to do that as well. I just like to mix it up. So I get some people that are very knowledgeable about knives. They know, they do have good taste. They know specs and so it also does work out great a lot of the time. I just kind of switch it back and forth and being able to do knives that I think are gonna look the coolest, perform the best, be the most interesting to me. They it just feeds a kind of a creative passion that is different from the custom knife. I do think the custom knives, like the custom ordered knives, I do think those kind of help me also try new things and stretch. So it's good to do both. I just really like doing both and going back and forth.
Hmm. Yeah, and the new brand, it's that looks really interesting too. It looks like are you doing investment casting for those
Yep.
the napkin rings or whatever? And like,
Yeah.
yeah, are you getting into uh I'm gonna show my ignorance here. I think investment casting is a process you can do with 3D printing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we used 3D printing for prototyping in the beginning. We did a lot of hand sculpted ideas. I have a box over here with a whole bunch of different clay pieces.
Can we
Uh,
see some?
yeah, for sure. Gonna grab all sorts of stuff I'm working on
Nice.
lately. Um, let's see. Okay,
Uh,
so might be worth just showing one of the finished napkin rings that we're doing. There are these
Wow.
sorts of pieces like this, cast bronze,
Uh-huh.
and then just tons of hand finishing. I mean,
Yeah.
the casting's one part, the hand finishing is
I
kind of
mean,
just,
look at all those little pits and divots
oh
and
my God, it's
like
crazy.
I don't
Yeah,
even know how you'd start with that. Like that'd take me all day on a Dremel. It's probably how
oh
I'd
my
try to
God.
do it.
So much work. And I'm getting a lot of help from my brother-in-law with the bronze finishing. It's kind of turned into a whole family operation and like
Uh-huh.
just because we need so much help. We're doing a lot of forged kind of silver barware.
Cool.
So these are kind of forged silver cocktail picks or cocktail skewers,
Oh,
as
cool.
well as like charcuterie board. These are done with sterling silver. We got different designs with some kind of like twisted kelp.
Ah,
We're doing a
beautiful.
lot of kind of nautical influence. We're doing a lot of smaller pieces. These are these little hinged kind of we're calling them wine glass signets.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. With
They
a
kind of fit
magnet.
around a wine stem. Yeah. And
Cool.
yeah, and then shoot, here's a lot of the kind of initial concepts in clay.
Okay.
We're
So
doing
you're like
stuff
getting
with
little creatures from the ocean and stamping them and
completely.
like, yeah.
Yeah, so you can see they're quite a bit bigger in the beginning. We sized
Uh-huh.
our pieces down quite a bit. Yeah, different kind of, I did a lot of bronze sculpture back in the day, so did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of just kind of traditional sculpting.
Sure.
It was a lot of very interesting back and forth where we are kind of taking some of these, then making, 3D model, tweaking the 3D model or like branching it to have multiple variations, uh, printing those, making silicone molds of various ones of those, making various waxes from those, resculpting the waxes. It allowed us to kind of try iterations of one concept.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. And then, taking these finished waxes and making a final silicone mold, which then the finished waxes are made from. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until you get
completely,
a positive that you can melt out that's got the surface finish you need to be able to like not spend the rest of your life polishing them when they come out, right?
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the steak knives, God, do I have one of the steak knives around? You mind if I go grab one of
Go
those?
for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sorry, I think all the steak knives are back at the shop, but I do have some of my other some of the knives I make for my own company, Nanda knives.
Yeah.
And so like this is one I just released.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling this arboreal, the Damascus pattern that
Uh-huh.
I made. I don't know if my camera is kind of focusing there, but
We can pull it up from Instagram. You got some really good
okay.
photos on there.
Yeah, it's on Instagram. This is a kind of a complex Damascus pattern that just takes a lot of repeat processes of layering steels, forge welding them together, manipulating the layers, recutting, restacking, and twisting. And that, this all starts with just layering two types of steels
Yeah.
and then manipulating to get this end result. And this pattern runs through the entire blade.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to
Wow.
grind into this and re-etch it in
You're
acid,
gonna get that same.
it's the same
That's
exact pattern.
crazy.
Yeah. So it's kind of like within the matrix of the steel. And this is something that I've like pursued quite a bit in the past many years is just kind of going after complex Damascus patterns. This is kind of a fun one here. Let's see. Well, I'll show the Nakiri. I've also been kind of working on a sword over the years, and I still need to finish it. But this is another
Wow.
one with this kind of more minimalistic kind
Uh-huh.
of squid tentacle pattern. This is a Nakiri blade, a little bit
Wow.
smudgy right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, that one's not on Instagram, but it will be soon. Um,
I love the shape of the handle.
thanks, yeah. And let's see. This is like a big Damascus. It's wrapped in this kind of a vacuum seal right now, but it's kind of a larger, it's going to be maybe a 24-inch sword eventually.
Cool.
I guess this side might show a little better. I've
So
got
that's those are for like collectors or
that one
where
would be.
yeah,
I don't do a lot of swords, but it's just so fun to mix it up every now and then.
sure.
Um, and then this is a piece. This is actually pretty interesting because for this knife, this is kind of a monosteel cleaver I'm working on. Monosteel
Wow.
just means it's one type of steel.
Uh-huh.
This one I'm going to experiment with a completely CNC'd handle. First time that I'll
Mm.
have one of my custom knives with that. So that's going to be CNC'd completely from aluminum. I've done the initial setups and kind of pocketing of the mortises and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I now just need to do the op 4 and op 5 to finish that piece out.
So have you done 3D scanning at all as part of this process?
No, I've always kind of multiple people have mentioned that, and it always seemed like something that could be helpful. God, there's just so many different processes that sometimes it's just like you just don't do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does seem like one that would just be very useful, and
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet.
I think it would because especially looking at the more organic stuff, right? So those napkin rings,
Yeah,
you feel way more comfortable sculpting that by hand than you would, you know, designing it in 3D and then 3D printing it.
yeah,
I'm not even sure. Like you would have to be an incredible digital sculptor to even try to pull that off. Like it's so complex and so much of it is just your own like feeling of working with the clay and all that. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I wouldn't even suggest to a newbie if somebody was interested in doing what you just did there, it would be like just do that by hand, right?
yeah.
Um, the 3D scanning part, like it's one of those things that's kind of like 3D printing where it's gotten so democratized that like you can get a really good 3D scanner now for like $1,000,
Oh,
you know?
crazy.
Yeah. So you could take
Huh.
those clay pieces and just get a full 3D scan of it and then bring that back into Fusion. And now you've got something, you've got a flawless file you can 3D print from. But the other thing you can do is that, since it comes in as a mesh and the other tools Fusion has, you can make a solid model out of it. And then you can work with it like with prismatic geometry. So like if you wanted to do something that was, like a machined part or, something that's much more like got some geometrical simplicity to it. It's then you can interface it and like I don't know. It opens up a whole lot of other possibilities that you're maybe not seeing right now.
I'd love to try it. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Maybe for
Anyway,
knife handles too, that could be interesting, just to kind of
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Is it possible to 3D scan something and turn it into a parametric model that you can then do CNC surfaces on?
Yes, yeah, you totally
Cool.
can. I mean, it's
Awesome.
there now. Parametric is that gets a little more tricky because, like, if you want to say you wanted to do like, today you brought one of your scans in and you made a solid model out of it, right?
Hmm.
Um, you're going to be able to scale it, right? You'll be able to scale it in 3 dimensions, but you wouldn't be able to say like, okay, my diameter is a different diameter, and then everything else
Right.
kind of follows along because you'd have to like build it from the ground up doing that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that's another option that comes in, which is like, depending on how complex the thing is, sometimes it's easier to just remodel the thing. Like you just
Sure.
go in the sculpt environment and push and pull stuff around until it's pretty close, and then you're starting to deal with stuff you've got a little more control over. But
Cool.
yeah, there's a whole world around that. Let me know offline, like send me an email or whatever, and I'll introduce you to some people that can help get you started with that.
Awesome.
Um,
So
yeah.
cool.
Question that I think our audience is probably going to have that you maybe have the answer to is why does the dishwasher dull your
Oh
kitchen
my
knife set?
God. But I mean, dishwashers are just terrible for anything that
Yeah.
that is nice. Just don't put, even if it says it's dishwasher safe, just if it's nice and costs you money, just don't put it in there. It's like just it's bad on a lot of stainless steels even. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but as far as like dulling your knife, I mean, probably I mean, there's definitely plenty of corrosive compounds in the detergents that are used. The high
Sure.
heat accelerates the chemical reaction
Uh-huh.
that happens. The worst thing that's happening in a dishwasher for your knives is just all of the delamination and kind of corrosion of all of your fit ups, like your handle materials
Hmm.
and all of that. And then also it's just claying around against other objects in the dishwasher. It's like
It's like the
bad
worst thing you can do.
across the board. Yeah, totally. There just really has to, if you are getting a high-end handmade knife, you just have to sign up for just treating it with more respect than other random, household objects you bought at Target.
What's the most expensive knife you've ever made?
The one I just showed you,
Yeah.
the arboreal piece, is the most expensive. It's listed at 5,500 right
Yeah.
now.
Is
It's not,
most of that labor?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean that
Labor and
etching,
just kind of the years in the process that got you to the point where you can make nicer
of
pattern.
course. Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like kind of you don't see as much of it out there.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like labor, 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 and then like the maybe collectability of that certain
Sure. Yeah, it's
certain
special.
workers work. Yeah.
And the that pattern on there, you said it's there at every layer. Do you just like pound it out and then etch that pattern? Is there like a
Yeah.
using like a stencil or something? Like what's how does
No
this?
stencils involved. It's 100% all just from manipulating the layers. So it's literally, it starts with just stacked layers of two different steels. And it's just kind of, the best way to think about it is kind of like black, white, like
Uh-huh.
high contrast, low contrast. So you got your high contrast steel that resists the acid, which is what
Uh-huh.
you etch it in at the very end. And then your low contrast, and well, it's not high contrast, low contrast. I would say high brightness and low brightness.
Yep.
So let me just pull this knife out to demonstrate it a bit again. Um, the sort of bright, high, like shiny silvery elements that you see, those are a steel that has nickel in it, and nickel resists the acid when you etch it.
Hmm.
So it starts with these two layers. You forge weld it so the layers become one unanimous material, draw it out, and then you cut those into various pieces, restack them, and then you take those pieces, forge weld them again into one unanimous material. You might twist it at that point. You might cut it, turn those cut pieces on their faces, and restack those. But it's totally a process of just forge welding the material, cutting it, manipulating it, restacking, recombining, reforge welding. And that knife, I think, has either 5 or 6 forge welding steps. And yeah, so many sequences of that very thing to get you there. But when it's done, it looks like a mono steel. It looks, you're sanding it to a high finish. It's just a bright silver, steel finish like it would be for any knife.
Sure.
It doesn't look like anything. And one of the most fun parts of the process and most fun parts to share is that acid dip. Right when you dip into the acid, you can take it back out in seconds and the pattern just starts coming out. And it's so cool. It's
Yeah.
always, it's for any maker, it's just that like that moment where you're just like, oh, hell yes, or ah, like it's kind of like, uh, but it's also always fun to share that part too. People love seeing it online, and it's the best. So it's
Yeah.
really fun just to see it go from some mono steel looking knife to just a crazy patterned piece like that.
Yeah. Let's pretend it's the zombie apocalypse
Mm.
and you need to go out and like procure supplies.
Yeah,
What
look.
what weapon do you make for yourself to brave not only the zombies but the non-zombie marauders?
Oh man.
You can only pick one.
Okay, God, I would probably want something with it just had to be some sort of sword with reach. I'd want reach.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want reach and wieldability. So something that, has some weight more toward you where you're holding it, a little bit lighter toward the end for dexterity, probably some sort of like I'd probably go with more of an Asian blade shape, samurai sword blade shape over a European.
Hmm.
Uh and yeah, that would be it, man. That would
Yeah.
be it. I
Nice.
just I think the samurai swords have that reach, and they're dexterous. You can swing them around, and that's
Yep.
what I would want.
Well, Nick, thanks for talking to us, man. This has been a really interesting conversation. I'm learning a lot here. This is not a topic I know a whole lot about. Can you tell us where to find you, where to find the new brand, and where to follow
Yeah.
you online?
Yeah, so my custom knives, Nanda Knives, is at Nanda Knives on Instagram. It's Nanda, and then Knives, Knives, nandaknives.com for my website. I have newsletter sign up and all of that there. The new company, the culinary accessories with all the bronze cast pieces and the silver forged skewers and the steak knives, it's Neoma Design. It's Neoma .design is our URL. And our Instagram is Neoma _design. And yeah, and those are the two main venues I'm working in as of now. And yeah, you can find everything there.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. Good talking to you. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great chatting with you too, man.
Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion 3 yourself, find the link in our description.